On the Buzz Meter this Sunday, a gusher of leaks. As CNN reports, Michael Cohen claims President Trump knew in advance about that Trump Tower meeting with a Russian lawyer. Vehemently denied by the president, as his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, today calls Cohen a pathological liar. This follows the leak of a tape in which Cohen and his former boss talk about a possible payoff to a former Playboy model. All this triggering a war of words about credibility.
Donald Trump hired Michael Cohen for a reason: to be brutal, to defend him at all costs while he was on his payroll. And now that the tables have turned, you can bet that Michael Cohen's going to be just as ugly.
The tape itself may not be the game changer, but the fact that it's been released and the fact that we're talking about this is a game changer. This is a complete flip by Michael Cohen.
I don't see anything here. I see a dud. There's nothing illegal about paying somebody who wants money in exchange for remaining silent.
The issue here is, first you got to decide whether or not you believe the CNN reporting. And there has been a lot of breathless reporting out there that has turned out not to be correct. Then, even if it is correct, you have to decide if you believe Mr. Cohen now.
Michael Cohen was trusted by President Trump for a long period of time. But sometimes when you're squeezing somebody, you not only make them sing, you make them compose. You make them exaggerate the story.
Does the tape show the Trump campaign wasn't truthful with the press about Karen McDougal? And are news outlets jumping to conclusions on the Trump Tower meeting without hard evidence? A bombshell report by Ronan Farrow, who helped bring down Harvey Weinstein, about the longtime boss at CBS.
The New Yorker magazine is reporting that 6 women have accused CBS chairman and CEO Leslie Moonves of sexual harassment.
Chilling allegations by these 6 women, including an actress who says Moonves years ago forcibly assaulted her and then got her fired for rejecting him. With the company investigating, is this television titan's job in jeopardy? Plus, Facebook stock plunges, the biggest one-day drop in the history of Wall Street. Are the privacy breaches and the fabrications and the misinformation driving that dramatic decline? And Twitter draws up presidential rebuke after being caught shadow banning prominent conservatives. I'm Howard Kurtz, and this is Media Buzz. President Trump is flatly denying a CNN report about the 2016 Trump Tower meeting involving Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner, and a Russian lawyer who claimed to be offering dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Sources with knowledge of the situation tell CNN the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, says he may tell Robert Mueller the president knew about that Trump Tower meeting with a possible Russian agent.
President tweeting that his former lawyer may be making this up to get himself out of legal difficulty. Quote, "And so the fake news doesn't waste my time with dumb questions. No, I did not know of the meeting with my son, Don Jr." It was Chris Cuomo's CNN show that aired Cohen's surreptitiously recorded tape of him and Trump discussing a possible payment in the fall of 2016 involving Karen McDougal. She's the Playboy model who says she had a decade-old affair with Trump. There's talk of paying in cash or a check, but the crosstalk is a bit hard to follow.
When it comes time for the financing, which will be...
Listen, what financing?
We'll have to pay you. So
I'll pay the kid.
No. I got... No.
Hey, Bill, how are you?
President tweeting this: "What kind of a lawyer would tape a client? So sad." And questioning why the tape was so abruptly terminated while he was presumably saying positive things. And his lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, and Cohen's lawyer, Lanny Davis, using the airwaves to snipe at each other.
Everyone out there, listen to the tapes. Whatever spin Mr. Giuliani is trying to invent, it says cash, and Michael Cohen says, no. Why is Giuliani out falsely disparaging Michael Cohen? Because they fear him.
He's been lying all week. I mean, he's been lying for years. I don't see how he has any credibility. I mean, this is basically if you had a trial, and there won't be a trial here, but if you had a trial, you'd say, well, which lie do you want to pick? You want to pick the first lie, the second lie, or maybe some new lie?
Door number 3. Joining us now to analyze the coverage, Guy Benson, political editor of townhall.com, Fox News contributor and co-host of the Benson and Harf Show on Sirius XM. Sarah Fisher, a media reporter for Axios. And Adrian Elrod, a Democratic strategist and former advisor to Hillary Clinton. Guy, we'll drill down to the details in a minute, but does the importance of this story about a possible payment to Karen McDougal, caught on tape, ambiguous context, warrant the intensity of the media coverage?
I think the president's trusted fixer and lawyer apparently flipping on him is a very significant story. Do we know that CNN's reporting that he might tell Mueller something? Is that really a huge story? I'm not so sure, because we need to see evidence, right? If it's just Michael Cohen making a claim about something that he thinks that Mueller or someone else might want to hear, now that he's in the crosshairs and he has his own skin to save, I think that's the question we need to be asking. And people might say, well, this is a statement against interest, right? Cohen's always been loyal to Trump, so for him to say this about Trump is really, really important. But I think that misses the point that Cohen's interests have changed very dramatically recently.
To put it mildly. Sarah, the media just love this particular story because it's sex, lies, and audio tape. And I think that's part of what's driving all the coverage.
I mean, it's absolutely what's driving the coverage. I mean, the concept of betrayal is always something that's going to grip viewers. But there's also another underlying theme here, which is, could there be more to come? Every time something new comes out from a tape, the media can latch onto a story that this isn't yet over.
Adrian, Rudy Giuliani now says that his experts have looked at this and they believe Cohen or somebody played with the tape, and it's a tape of a tape. Lanny Davis, Cohen's lawyer, came back and said Rudy's confused, and he also waived his own attorney-client privilege by speaking inaccurately of the tape. My question is, look, I think we probably could all agree that most people don't care what Donald Trump did with Karen McDougal in 2006. But his campaign denied to the Wall Street Journal in the closing days of the campaign that the candidate knew anything about this.
Right.
So is that the media issue?
Well, I think the issue here is going back to exactly what Guy said, which is this is somebody who has been fiercely loyal to President Trump for years as his attorney. Now all of a sudden he's flipping. He's trying to save himself from jail time, and which he faces.
Okay, granted, but does he have credibility with which he is flipping, or at least the reports about what he says?
Well, I think he has credibility because we know that he has more tapes coming out. This tape may be grainy, but there's other tapes that we know exist, and those tapes may actually be a little bit easier to decipher.
Look, I'm open to more evidence, right? And we should follow the evidence in this case, but there has been some whiplash within the media on the credibility of Michael Cohen, where he was dismissed forever as, oh, this is just a Trump lackey who's loyal to Donald Trump. Yeah. And now that he's not loyal to Donald Trump, well, let's listen to this guy.
Well, it's fair to criticize him for taping his client, and that doesn't look good for him. He is obviously positioning himself to cooperate with Robert Mueller. But you have Rudy Giuliani 3 months ago. The guy's an honest lawyer. He's a good man now. He says he's learned what a liar he is. Let me ask you. So Lanny Davis is drawing a lot of media fire. Now, this guy is a Clinton White House veteran. I remember talking to him about a different presidential sex scandal when he was defending the president. He comes back and says, well, Giuliani was lying about this tape because before we heard at least the snippets of the tape, Giuliani said it was exculpatory for the president. So I don't know. I'm getting a kind of a 1998 deja vu all over again feeling about this.
Yeah, look, I'm a huge fan of Lanny Davis. I've known him for a long time. He is a great attorney, but he's also a very good, spin meister, if you will. He's very good at using the media to his advantage and his client's advantage. Exactly, exactly. So it's sort of a twofold
But the notion
thing.
that he's doing this as payback because Hillary, his friend, lost the election, I mean, he's a lawyer hired to represent a client.
Right, and look, there are not very many people, and you know this, Howard, there are not very many people in this business who have the legal background and the PR background to combine the two. So you get to really, where you get to a very small field of people, and Lanny, of course, is going to be somebody that Michael Cohen is going to look at hiring.
It's called crisis management.
Exactly.
So the Inquirer, for people who don't know, is a tabloid run by, the company is run by a close pal of the president's, David Pecker. And so when we hear on the tape, and the Inquirer had already spent $150,000 to buy and then bury the story from Karen McDougal. They say they couldn't confirm it, and also they paid her for some columns. But the way in which Donald Trump and Michael Cohen are talking about, well, we'll just get the rights from them and we'll pay them some money, cash or check. Does that raise questions about the Inquirer's role, and is it even, the relationship even cozier than we might have thought?
I mean, absolutely. This practice, known as catch and kill in the tabloid world, it's not something you would typically see from a vetted media outlet, where you pay rights to get a story and then you don't publish it just so that the story goes away. I mean, the Wall Street Journal reported that the DOJ is looking into how close the National Enquirer's relationship was with the Trump campaign. Was it an extension of the Trump campaign, or is it a media outlet? And why are we even asking that question? Because protections for media outlets are very strong in this country, First Amendment protections. But if this company is doing something that warrants going above and beyond what a media company is and working more closely with the president, well, that could change its rights.
Yeah, this is like a movie that has everything. So on this business about the Trump Tower meeting in 2016 with the Russian lawyer, I can report based on my sources that it is true that Michael Cohen believes or claims that he has evidence that there was a meeting with other people involved. Obviously, it'd have to be corroborated. That shows that the president, who has denied this, knew in advance and approved in advance of this meeting with the Russian lawyer. But also, you have Lanny Davis denying that his side leaked this Trump Tower story to CNN because their view is that Cohen has no interest in this coming out now. It kind of damages him with prosecutors. Rudy Giuliani today said, well, they didn't leak it. And I guess the question is, should the media be giving that, you started out the segment with this, giving so much attention to that allegation? It's sort of secondhand now. We don't have Cohen saying it directly. There's no tape. There's no document. It's going to be one person's word against another. Obviously, it needs to be reported, but does it need to be reported with great caution?
Yes, with great caution, but the allegation is explosive because it's someone who was in the inner sanctum of Trump world for a very long time who is saying that one of the major assertions made over and over again by the president and his entire team about that Trump Tower meeting is false and would be like a capital L lie, a really big one, if Michael Cohen is telling the truth. And
would it
that
be
is a giant if with 2 underscores.
Would it be a lie that would be much more important because it was about this, well, I guess you could call it attempted collusion. Obviously, nothing came of that meeting, more so than his relationship with a woman who posed for Playboy?
Definitely.
All right. Sarah, I got to ask you, are we now again headed for the kind of face-off that media love? Donald Trump versus Michael Cohen, the guy who said he'd take a bullet for him and now obviously is trying to use his own ammunition. Obviously to protect his own interests, but also I think he seems to be saying, look, I did a lot of things for Donald Trump. He was my boss. I'm not proud of them. He hasn't used these words, but now he's a president and I'm going to come clean.
That's exactly right. The media is looking to have this relationship be contentious so that they can follow it like a horse race back and forth. You hear CNN and some of the other outlets saying that this is a complete flip. Then you hear on some other outlets, no, this might not be a complete flip. It's just that he's under different kinds of pressures. It really depends on what outlet you're representing and where you're coming at this. But yes, it's a horse race and it's something interesting to follow.
The further importance of this Trump Tower business, Adrian, is that after a year or plus more than that of investigation of Russian collusion, we don't have much evidence. But this is the one meeting we know about where there was at least an attempt to get information from a Russian lawyer who said, it kind of fizzled, that she had stuff on Hillary Clinton. So whether or not candidate Trump, now President Trump, knew about it in advance, you can see why the media are so hot on this.
No, absolutely. They're hot on this because they want to see if Donald Trump essentially lied about this. And if Michael Cohen has actual empirical evidence that Donald Trump was aware of this meeting before, and if he has that evidence on tape, it's going to be very damaging for President
Trump.
But
there's no tape on this. There's no claim there's any tape on this. So either prosecutors will find other people in the room who will say that never happened and Cohen will not be able to back it up, or he will. But I just wonder, you know, it is our job to sort of follow all these things, and they get complicated. What's on tape? What's not on tape? Did he say cash? Did he say check? And I wonder how much it is resonating, even on the stuff about the meeting with the Russian lawyer, with lots of people out there who might be much more interested in other things.
Well, I think the American people, you just look at polling. Gallup had a poll of election priorities, and the Russia matter was polling at 0% as a top election priority, which is not to say that this stuff doesn't matter and people aren't paying attention to the investigation and some of the twists and turns, but I think the granular, constant attention paid to it in this sort of D.C. New York media corridor is totally outsized compared to what normal people care about.
So is it possible, Adrian, that if it could even be shown to be true, and the president would say, well, I forgot that I knew about it, I forgot about that meeting, that all of those people, that 45% who passionately support him, wouldn't care?
Absolutely, it's possible, and that's exactly what Donald Trump does. He disrupts the media cycle. He uses the media cycle to his advantage, and he creates a lot of confusion. So, yes, I mean, to say what we were just talking about a while ago, is there a tape, is there not a tape? Why does it matter if there is a tape? I mean, it's very confusing. We like to talk about it here on the Acela corridor, but I think the average American is just kind of letting this slide by and not paying as much attention.
I got to get a break. There are even people who live between Boston and Washington who might not care about this all that much. Sarah, we'll see you a little later. I had the devastating New Yorker piece about CBS chairman Les Moonves and numerous allegations of sexual misconduct. This is pretty ugly stuff. When we come back, some journalists say the president is creating an alternative reality, just as he tells the public not to believe what they say. There's a new accusation being made by the New York Times and some other news outlets that President Trump is trying to sell his supporters on an alternative reality.
Don't believe the crap you see from these people, the fake news. What you're seeing and what you're reading is not what's happening.
So, Guy, the New York Times headline on that story is Trump rages against reality. Don't believe the crap. And the story says he's increasingly living in a world of selected information and bending the truth to his own narrative. Now, is that fair? Because that's almost exactly what the president and his supporters would say about the media's portrayal of him.
Right. And it also sounds a lot like a politician who wants the media narrative that he or she supports and looks good for them. You might say that Trump is unusually aggressive in his public posturing on this, but I think it's not unprecedented by any stretch for an administration to cherry pick the type of coverage that they want to tout and then dismiss or downplay others. And I do think that there is, Trump goes overboard frequently, I think, sometimes on this stuff. Enemy of the American people, I think, is way too far. But it is true that a huge percentage of the mainstream media is actively rooting against him. They want him to fail. They want to bring him down. And they want to create lose-lose paradigms for him where no matter what he does, they're going to pile on.
Adrian.
Yeah, this is where I'm going to actually disagree with Guy on this. I mean, look, Donald Trump believes if any media coverage of him is negative, it is fake news. That is how he frames it. That's what he tells his supporters. They rally against.
He says fake. We think inaccurate. But you say it's just
well, or we think that he
unflattering.
did something that was worthy of the press coverage that he received, right? Like just because he does something that causes stories to be negatively written about him, usually he's the one who's causing, who's actually doing these actions.
But here's the thing: when the press says Trump's creating a false reality, and he does sometimes exaggerate or get things wrong, there's an automatic assumption that the media narrative is 100% accurate. So Don Lemon on CNN the other night, the headline began the show with Donald Trump's presidency is defined by lies. Could you point to particular things that are not true? Yeah, but what about, in other words, we can't make the automatic assumption that everything the media say are true about this.
Right, and look, I think to a larger extent, this was sort of something that was amalgamating to the point that we are today in America, where you have so many sensational outlets on the left and the right, media coverage, and people don't necessarily know where to go to actually get the truth.
Not necessarily sensational, but certainly increasingly partisan. And by the way, in this story, the lead anecdote was based on an email. Donald Trump was upset because all the TVs on Air Force One are supposed to be tuned to Fox News, and Melania's set was on CNN, and it actually prompted Melania's spokeswoman to say, and kind of dismissing the question as silly, the First Lady can watch any channel she wants.
That was, I think, the hook of the story. They wanted to show that there was some tension between the first couple. And it's an interesting anecdote. We, of course, appreciate the president's viewership here. I'm sure Mrs. Trump is happy to use a remote control as she sees fit.
This is another couple fighting over the remote.
Yeah, exactly, except on our Air Force One.
Yeah.
I do think that what we're seeing is an unreliable narrator problem. Trump absolutely has his trouble with the truth, and I do not deny that. The media also has a credibility problem, and they don't always see it.
An interesting footnote, because the president's always talking about the failing New York Times. He tweeted this morning that he had a good meeting with A.G. Sulzberger, the publisher of the New York Times. Adrian Elrod, Guy Benson, great to see you this Sunday. Ahead, Facebook stock in a major crash as the company struggles with the fallout from those massive breaches of privacy. But up next, a look at the media outrage as the White House disinvites a CNN reporter from a public event after she shouted questions at the president. I'm sure it seems rude when reporters shout questions at presidents, which has been going on at least since the days of Sam Donaldson and Ronald Reagan. Well, the White House pushed back hard the other day when CNN correspondent Caitlin Collins, among others, was yelling questions at President Trump after a photo op with the head of the European Commission.
Did Michael Cohen betray you, Mr. President?
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President.
Keep moving, guys. Let's go.
Did Michael Cohen betray you?
Start moving,
Are you leaning towards tariffs on cars, sir?
Thank you, everybody.
Mr. President, are you worried about what Michael Cohen is going to say to prosecutors?
Thank you, Caitlin. Let's keep going.
Are you worried about what is on the other tapes, Mr. President?
Thank you all. Let's keep going. Thank you, everybody.
Why has Vladimir Putin not accepted your invitation?
Keep going. Thanks, everybody.
President.
Collins says Press Secretary Sarah Sanders and Deputy Chief of Staff Bill Shine, a former co-president of Fox News, later barred her from an event open to the press and told her this.
That I would not be invited to an open press event here in the Rose Garden moments later at the White House because they thought the questions that I posed to President Trump were inappropriate for that venue. Shine challenged that version of events with reporters.
Did you ask her if we ever use the word man? I've seen it on lower thirds.
What word would you use, Bill? What word would you use?
When you ask her if we ever use the word man, then I will answer that question.
I'm told the White House official said to Collins that this was a one-time disciplinary action and CNN could send someone else, and that she's free to shout questions in other venues, but they said it was disrespectful to do it in the Oval Office in front of another world leader. CNN called the move retaliatory and an affront to a free press, saying in a statement, just because the White House is uncomfortable with a question regarding the news of the day doesn't mean the question isn't relevant and shouldn't be asked. Fox News President Jay Wallace said this network stands in strong solidarity with CNN for full access for our journalists.
As a member of the White House press pool, Fox stands firmly with CNN on this issue of access.
The bottom line is this is almost unprecedented. It is inexcusable for the White House to make this move. It is not going to be tolerated by members of the White House press corps. I will tell you that.
It was completely uncalled for and a really sad moment, I think, not only for journalism, but for the country.
It's not clear why Caitlin Collins was singled out. The Washington Post reports that Trump has pushed to punish other reporters for impertinent or shouted questions, but that aides have talked him out of it, at least until now. The reason reporters routinely yell questions at the president at these events, more so than in previous administrations, is that Trump often answers them, even as his press wranglers try to shoo reporters out of the room. Ahead on MediaBuzz, Twitter is found to have engaged in shadow banning prominent conservatives. And the president wants an investigation. But first, a move to impeach Rod Rosenstein draws plenty of media attention as Robert Mueller investigates Donald Trump's Twitter account. The New York Times touched off a media debate by reporting that Robert Mueller is focusing on a new source of information in his investigation of possible obstruction of justice by the president. Donald Trump's tweets, which are, of course, quite public and read by 53 million followers. Joining us now from New York, Morgan Ortegas, a former Treasury Department official and co-chair of the Maverick PAC. And here in Washington, Bill Press, host of the online Bill Press Show and author of From the Left, A Life in the Crossfire. Morgan, so this was the lead story in the New York Times, Mueller scrutinizing Trump's tweets, especially about Jim Comey and Jeff Sessions as part of this obstruction inquiry. Now, this was presented in the story as a perfectly plausible prosecutorial strategy, but I'm thinking, tweets?
Well, I'm certainly not a lawyer, Howie, but I would say that, what I found interesting this week is three major things happened. The GDP was put at 4.1%, which is the largest economic growth since we've seen since the third quarter of 2014.
Which was
we
covered.
added $7 trillion to the economy and new growth. And what's incredibly important to me as a member of the military is the fact that we got our remains home from North Korea from our men who were lost there decades ago.
Well, both of those stories were covered. Both of those stories
they
were
were covered, but yeah, right. So I bring that up to say that I think those things are what's really important to the American people. If you're running a small business like my father is in Florida, having GDP growth of 4% is really important. Another story about tweets, about the president's tweets, are not important to him, although I have to say he probably doesn't read the New York Times.
Well, he met with the publisher of the New York Times, according to his own tweet. Bill, I'll let you respond to the question of whether it's an important story or not. It's certainly got plenty of pickup, but also doesn't it suggest that Robert Mueller doesn't have all this super secret evidence we might have imagined, and so he's trying to tie the tweets to a pressure campaign against these top aides?
Well, first of all, I got to say, sure. If I were in the White House, I'd want them to be talking about the economy and bringing the remains home from North Korea and all of that. The problem is that Donald Trump keeps tweeting, and then he goes on to other subjects. He attacks Robert Mueller and he attacks Michael Cohen, and so he steps on his own story. I think that's part of the problem. Part of the problem here, Howie.
In fairness, the Times does quote Rudy Giuliani as saying, if you're going to obstruct justice, you do it quietly and secretly, not with these public blasts.
I would say traditionally you would. I read that. But Donald Trump doesn't do anything the way everybody else had already done it. This takes me back to the early days of the Trump White House. In the press room, Sean Spicer. We didn't know, right, covering the White House, how to deal with these tweets. And we asked Sean Spicer, should we take these seriously or not? And Sean Spicer said, every tweet is a presidential statement. Yes, take them seriously. So you cannot ignore these tweets.
Oh, nobody's accusing the media of ignoring them.
The President of the United States is going out after Sessions or Comey. Right. I think it does raise an issue.
Morgan, another story there was a lot of coverage of, and this was generated by the Republican side, 11 conservative House Republicans introducing an impeachment resolution against Rod Rosenstein, the Deputy Attorney General, for allegedly slow-walking requests for documents. This was never going anywhere. Paul Ryan shut it down. They've kind of backed off. But it got a lot of coverage to compete with such things as you say, the 4.1% jump in the GDP this quarter.
Listen, I think the Tea Party wanted that coverage, Howie. I mean, I think that they are incredibly frustrated. What they feel like was a slow-walking effort by the DOJ to get these documents out. And then on top of it, they were incredibly frustrated as a co-equal branch of government at the amount of redactions. So this was, I think, the Tea Party shot across the bow.
Right, but so why don't you
DOJ.
view, if you didn't particularly like the New York Times lead story on Mueller and Trump's tweets, why don't you view that as a distraction? And I say that only because it was obvious to anybody who's been in Washington 10 minutes that they don't have the votes in the House to impeach Rosenstein.
No, they don't have it, but I think that this is what the Tea Party wanted. They wanted to get this. You saw Jim Jordan announced for Speaker this week. So do I think it's the best strategy going into election for Republicans in vulnerable districts? I don't think that they love this story at all. In fact, I think that they would want the focus to be on the GDP, on the North Korean remains. But the Tea Party has proven, you know, for the past 7 years to be incredibly effective at drumming up media coverage, because what happens is the loudest people in your party on either side, I'm sure the Democrats think this about some of their members as well, the people that are the loudest are the ones that get the microphone shoved right in front of their face.
Let me use a loud voice to get Bill back in here. Critics say this is really because they don't like the way Rosenstein has overseen the Mueller investigation, but given that it was never going anywhere, should it have been covered as a kind of a PR stunt?
You know why, I think? But first of all, that's what it was.
Yeah.
To borrow a phrase.
I'm not against PR stunts.
No, to borrow a phrase, it was media buzz. I mean, they wanted to make some media buzz before they left for the break, and they wanted to help, Morgan's right, they wanted to help Jim Jordan and his impossible quest for Speaker. Look, there ain't going to be any impeachment, and there ain't going to be any Jim Jordan as Speaker. I think it got some publicity because it was so dumb. It was so reckless. It's never going to get a vote. Paul Ryan is not going to bring this up for a vote in the House. So it was strictly, I don't know, not even a Hail Mary pass. It was a stunt.
Well, it worked then because it got a lot of coverage. And, you know, impeachment aside, if the president wants to get rid of Rod Rosenstein, he can fire him tomorrow, except obviously there'd be a huge political backlash. Bill Press, Morgan Ortegas, thanks very much. Great discussion, guys.
Thanks.
Coming up, CBS chairman Les Moonves was already enmeshed in a corporate struggle to save his company. Now he's facing devastating allegations by 6 women who told The New Yorker he engaged in unwanted sexual conduct and harassment going back more than 2 decades. That's next. Ronan Farrow, the Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter, has published a highly detailed account in The New Yorker of sexual misconduct allegations by 6 women against CBS chairman Les Moonves. Actress Ileana Douglas says that during a 1997 business meeting, Moonves pinned her down so she couldn't breathe, violently kissed her and tried to grope her, and then after she fought him off, was cold to her and had her fired from a sitcom called Queens, which she'd already been cast. Moonves says he immensely regrets some mistakes in making some women uncomfortable decades ago, but denied trying to harm anyone's career. We're back with Sarah Fisher of Axio. So this account by Ileana Douglas by itself is revolting. And it underscores that based on Ronan Farrow's reporting, Moonves has a problem, and CBS, which fired Charlie Rose for other allegations a few months back, also has a problem.
It underscores a huge problem at CBS. Look, if this type of behavior is coming from the chairman of the company, it could be seen as a reflection of the general and overall culture at CBS. And Ronan Farrow's piece didn't just highlight, by the way, some of the things happening with Les Moonves, but also other executives. Jeff Fager at CBS, its flagship news show. So there's a lot of things that we have to look at whether or not this culture needs to be revisited.
Jeff Fager, who runs 60 Minutes, denied this, and it was mostly about whether he tolerated what other people are doing. And he's a former president of CBS News. So just to let people who haven't read this lengthy piece, there's a writer, Janet Jones, says that after Moonves sexually accosted her and locked the door in 1985, he later threatened her, "I'm warning you, I will ruin your career. You'll never get a writing job. No one will hire you." And then she threw up. And there's another woman who said, and this is 2006, that Moonves put his hand up her skirt, touched her underwear. These are Harvey Weinstein type allegations.
They're terrible allegations, and something that you just were describing there is not just sexual harassment, but it could be physical harassment as well, which is a whole nother level of danger to people working at that company. One other thing there too is that these people feel as though their careers were destroyed or really impacted by some of these victimizing instances, and that's a whole nother level of problems that CBS is going to have to address too.
Right, and obviously many of these women, and many of them years ago, felt they couldn't come forward. Now, so CBS confirms that in the case of Ileana Douglas, the actress, that Moonves kissed her, but denies a lot of the other stuff. Now, look, there have been high-level firings at other companies, NBC with Matt Lauer, NPR, of these kinds of issues, but not since the late Roger Ailes was forced out of Fox News over a series of sexual harassment allegations. Has the head of a company, a major corporate mogul who's been running that place for a long time, who's married to CBS star Julie Chen, who's supporting him, faced these kinds of accusations?
Not in the media. And the crazy thing here is that in many other instances in other different industries or lower levels down in the media, once these allegations come out, there's an immediate suspension. There's an immediate action that's being taken. CBS's board immediately said that they were going to be investigating this, but Les Moonves is still the chairman. He's still the chief executive at this company, and we'll see what happens, but we have no indication right now that anything.
Well, I credit CBS for immediately saying there'll be an investigation. I credit CBS News for reporting on this, but can you immediately suspend the head of the company based on what are allegations in a respected magazine?
It's debated, but he did admit to some unwarranted advances and to some, looking at this allegations between 1980s to 2000s and admitting to some of that. To me, that says that there's an ongoing problem.
Right, and a cultural problem perhaps as well. So as you know, Moonves was already involved in a big legal and corporate battle with Sumner Redstone's daughter, Shari Redstone, who's sort of the controlling stockholders, wants to combine it with Viacom, the former parent company. Could the surfacing of these sexual misconduct allegations be related to that battle? Shari Redstone put out a statement saying that's a malicious insinuation, but doesn't mean that people around her aren't leaking.
Doesn't mean that people around her aren't leaking. That's right. Look, there is a very ugly battle happening with Shari Redstone and Les Moonves right now. Some say that maybe she was involved in this, that she could try to take advantage of the situation and ensure that she could dictate the future of CBS. But there's no proof right now that Shari Redstone had anything to do with this.
Right. But whatever the motivation to come up against this, all of these women, many of them on the record, you'd have to say that there were questions about Les Moonves holding on to his job.
Oh, absolutely, especially because they're investigating him.
Right. All right, more to come on this. Sarah Fisher, thanks so much for your reporting on this. After the break, Mark Zuckerberg loses billions as Facebook stock slide makes Wall Street history. Charlie Gasparino is on deck. It was the largest one-day drop of any stock in Wall Street history as Facebook shares plummeted 19%, wiping out $120 billion of the company's value and costing Mark Zuckerberg himself many billions. This against the backdrop of growing outrage about the company's privacy breaches and its tolerance of fabrication and misinformation. Joining us now from Connecticut, Charlie Gasparino, senior correspondent for Fox Business. And Charlie, wasn't this market plunge in part a reaction to Facebook admitting it's going to have to spend more money, many millions of dollars more money, to try to protect people's privacy, which it's done such a terrible job at, as well as keep lies and harassment off the site?
Yeah, I mean, listen, don't you feel sorry for Mark Zuckerberg? He lost a few $1 billion off his network. Listen, the bottom line is that all these social media platforms are essentially free, right? You don't have to pay to get on them. But you do pay in other ways. You do pay in a lack of privacy, and anything that will cut back, because they use your user information to sell stuff. Anything that sort of limits, that helps privacy, that limits the amount of user growth that goes on to these platforms, whether it's bots or fake accounts or anything else, because you can sell ads to them as well. You know, the ad metrics sell to bots as well. Will hurt the stock price of both It's fascinating that it both happened to Facebook and Twitter at exactly the same week.
We'll get to Twitter in just a second, but it seems to me that it's all, the company's projecting slower growth. Younger people think it's uncool now, so they go to Snapchat. But is the market punishing Facebook and Zuckerberg for a whole series of failures going back to Russian election propaganda and the Cambridge Analytica data scandal, and now it has to police its content, and that costs a lot of money?
Yeah, I don't think it's political. The market is saying simply this, that your user growth, if you really do police bots and fake Russian accounts and all these other metrics, will go down. Therefore, your ad revenue will go down. Therefore, your stock is probably not worth where it is now. And they're projecting it out. Now, this may change. Facebook may come up with a new app, with something else that increases user growth. Who knows? Sheryl Sandberg came to that company when it was on its knees a few years ago and built it back up. But that's what the market is saying now. And they're saying the same thing about Facebook and Twitter, because it's all about user growth, Howie. That's the bottom line. And if you can't grow it, well, then your ad revenues come down.
That's absolutely true. And of course, the policing content is really hard. I mean, first you had the flap about Zuckerberg saying it was okay for Holocaust deniers to have a page, which is insane. And then Alex Jones, who peddles conspiracy theories through InfoWars, they said he was fine, and they changed their mind, and now some videos have been banned, and Jones has been suspended for 30 days, violating rules against hate speech and bullying. So I'm just bringing it up to show that this is an immense challenge for Facebook. But I do want to get to Twitter, because Twitter, you pointed this out. So on Friday, the stock was down 21%. A lot of that had to do with Twitter belatedly purging about 1 million fake accounts. Should have been done long ago. Also, we have this controversy with Vice reporting that Twitter was shadow banning the RNC chairwoman, top GOP lawmakers, Donald Trump Jr.'s spokesman, and that means they reduced their visibility by making it harder to search for. Didn't happen to the DNC chairman, didn't happen to Democrats. President Trump said, we're going to look into this discriminatory and legal practices at once, many complaints. Twitter says it's unintentional and fixed it. What's your take?
I could tell you, I've spoke with Twitter senior management about this notion that Twitter and all social media is anti-conservative. They are extremely sensitive to this. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't have human beings who create these algorithms that create, that could shadow ban certain conservatives, that they're not biased. But I can tell you, the company itself has told me they are taking extreme measures to be equal, both for conservatives as well as liberals. We had interesting conversations about President Trump, and his use of Twitter. By the way, this is a guy that essentially drives plenty of traffic to Twitter. He's hardly not liberal, and some of his tweets go close to the line of violating the terms of service. And I actually asked one senior official, I go, do you ever think about banning Donald Trump, or at least disciplining him? The one time they said they actually seriously considered that was in the Megyn Kelly flap with that tweet that then candidate Trump sent out about Megyn Kelly following what she asked him during the debate. But they're basically saying, listen, we're not taking we're not going after Trump because we believe that he's a vital voice. He's the president. He uses Twitter. So they say that they're trying to be equal here. Now it's an imperfect equal. We know that. Sure. And by the way, they did fix that shadow banning problem.
Right. No, I did mention that. And look, I take the company at its word. We have about 20 seconds here. Facebook also has been accused. I mean, look, Silicon Valley is a left-leaning place of being biased against conservatives. I think they're both trying, but it can't be a coincidence that when there is bias or search problems, it happens to discriminate against people on the right.
Mostly. That's kind of weird, right? Well, I mean, think about it. Who creates the algorithms that allows the discrimination? Well, it's some Silicon Valley left-wing kid probably, right?
I think that might sum it up. All right, we got to go. Charlie Gasparino, great to see you. Thanks very much for your reporting on both of these tech giants, which are just having a hard time this year. Still to come, the president denounces an FCC decision that went against Sinclair TV, and Roseanne says she's sorry again. The FCC unanimously sidelined and potentially derailed a major merger between right-leaning Sinclair Broadcast and Tribune Media that would have created a TV giant reaching 70% of American households and possibly led to national conservative programming that could compete with Fox News. In an unusual move, President Trump tweeted that the independent commission's decision was disgraceful. So sad and unfair that the FCC wouldn't approve the Sinclair Broadcast merger with Tribune. This would have been a great and much-needed conservative voice for and of the people. The company denied the FCC's accusation that its plan to sell off some stations to less than independent insiders was misleading. Roseanne Barr got another apology do-over after losing her ABC show over that racist tweet about Obama White House aide Valerie Jarrett. Roseanne, who now says she thought Jarrett was white, said this to Sean Hannity.
If she's watching, I'm so sorry that you thought I was racist and that you thought that my tweet was racist, because it wasn't. It was political. And I'm sorry for the misunderstanding that caused my ill-worded tweet. And, you know, I'm sorry that you feel harmed and hurt. And plus, I tell her she's got to get a new haircut. I mean, seriously, she needs a new haircut.
Well, that's better than the YouTube video she posted in which Roseanne called Jarrett the B word. Look, I like Roseanne, who also talked about suffering from mental illness, and her self-immolation was kind of sad. This apology is pretty late in the game, but maybe it stops the bleeding, at least for the future. That's it for this edition of Media Buzz. I'm Howard Kurtz. Hey, check out my new podcast, Media Buzz Meter. We kick around the day's 5 most important or fascinating or buzzy stories with such guests as Molly Hemingway and Jillian Turner. You can subscribe at Apple iTunes, Google Play, or foxnewspodcast.com. Also, check out our Facebook page. I read all the comments. We post my videos there every day, original videos, and my daily column, so we can continue the debate and the conversation there as well. Even if Facebook and Twitter do have their problems, they're good platforms. All right, we're back here next Sunday. We'll see you then with the latest buzz.